What about it, YouTube? Okay, let's talk about churches. Okay? Now, I was raised Mormon, and as such, being within that religion, you are, especially from birth, converts are let in on the same information, but if you're born into it like I was, from the time you can understand what people are saying when they speak, you're hearing repeated over and over and over again, quote, I know Joseph Smith is a true prophet, and I know the church is true. So, using the Mormon religion as an example, they're putting themselves as the gateway to heaven. Now, within that dogma is other, for lack of a better word, heresies that describe the situation after you die. Instead of referring to Jesus when he acknowledges that there's gnashing of teeth and a lake of fire that awaits those who won't turn away from their sin, who won't turn to God for forgiveness by losing their pride, by becoming forgiving, by offering their life to the Lord. Those people in the Mormon religion who say aren't Mormons, right, would go to a lower level of heaven. In the Mormon religion, there's 3 levels of heaven. So I don't want to dwell on Mormons too much, but the point is that A, they present themselves as an idol and the way to get to the best heaven. And B, they don't put the fear of God in their members' eyes because your worst suffering, this is what they tell you. This is what the Mormons tell you. That Joseph Smith was allowed to see the lowest kingdom of heaven. There's the celestial, the upper kingdom, the telestial, and the terrestrial. I mean, the 2 of them are so close in terminology that they're easily confused. But there's a higher kingdom, a middle kingdom, and a lower kingdom. And because of your good works within the church, you can obtain this higher kingdom. And in the higher kingdom, they can come down and see the lower kingdom, but the lower kingdoms cannot go up. Okay, so you can always go down, but you can't go up. Okay, so that's the second problem, is they don't put the fear of God in their members' eyes because their members' eyes don't see any problems. No matter what they do, and no matter what somebody else does, they won't face a harsh judgment. They do talk about a hell, but that's for what they call a son of perdition, and that's reserved for people who had a full knowledge of God and then denied him. You'd have to probably ask them what that means, but let's just say that it becomes very rare. It becomes almost impossible for someone to find themselves in hell, according to the Mormon dogma. Okay? So that's enough about Mormons, and that's just because that's what I grew up with. But if any church that you are involved with presents itself as the only true church, as the way for its members to receive God's grace, as the gateway to heaven, they are making themselves an idol, and you should not only walk, you should run away. Okay? That's what I would say is the first test of any church that you need to put them through. Are they saying that they are special and that you are special to be a member because God recognizes this church as something glorified, this church as something itself to get you to receive God's mercy and God's kingdom? That's the first test. Run away. The second test I would suggest would be Zionism. If your church is actively preaching Zionist rhetoric, don't walk, run away. Run away. It's heretical. It's terrible. You're being fooled, and it's God's enemy. So those who rejected Jesus have remained in rebellion for 2,000 years. Any preacher who suggests that Jews, A, don't need to be converted, B, are working with God in these end times, C, have gone through enough and they need our unconditional support and love and charity towards them. Okay, if your church is suggesting those things about God's enemy, run away. Run away. Okay? Now, if your church, the only one I can think of is Steven Anderson. Steven Anderson gets a lot right, but then he goes on to become, exactly what he complains about. He goes on to be hateful. He goes on to be just hateful. I don't know another term for it. But his message is lost, and his message loses all of its value because he calls names, he becomes agitated, he becomes aggressive to a point. Whenever he's confronted with either sodomy or the Jewish question, he loses his cool. All right, so there's that side of it too. If your church loses its cool and becomes hateful and basically Jew LARPs around because they become so hateful towards whoever, run, don't walk. Okay? So, what does that leave you with? All right? And what is church? Church should be a way for you to share in the Lord. Church should be a way for you to meet other people and be reconfirmed and reassured in the Lord that there are others among you who have the same love for Jesus as you do. Now, invariably, there's going to be differences in theology among the members, right? So don't get caught up in what this member or that member might believe if you find a church that you're comfortable with. What you should be most concerned with is what the preacher is saying. If the message is biblical and strictly biblical and is constantly referring to the Bible and is not promoting the church but is promoting God's message, then you've found a great church. I've found one. It's a great church. Okay? The church I've found does give warnings, but they're subtle. There's a lot of praise. There's a lot of rejoicing. There's and that's great. Okay? But the contrast would be like a pastor like Chuck Baldwin, who I love. But Chuck Baldwin is, like, if you listen to one of his messages, one of his sermons, it's also biblical, but it just comes from a different angle of warning the Christians. Here's what's at our gate. Here's the enemy. Here's the proof. Here's what the Bible says. Here's how you should be prepared. So I love him and I love his message too. But he doesn't spend a lot of time on let's rejoice in the love and let's offer our love and let's, and I'm not criticizing either one. Both approaches are approaches that I like. So I get Chuck Baldwin during the week and I get my local service during Sundays, end of the week. Okay? Do I think you need a church? Not necessarily if you're single like I am. No, you don't necessarily need one. It's great if you can find one, just because, again, what I said before. But mostly where you'll probably want a church is if you have a family, somewhere you can take the kids and give them structure, because kids need sort of a schedule and some structure and some habitual ritualism so that they can get on board and be in tune as they progress and become adults. So if you have children, I think that the search for a church is more important. But if you're single, don't feel like you need to go to church. You may want to find one where you can get baptized. You may want to, touch and go, but sometimes it's difficult to find a church that you like and that you feel good with. And so, don't get caught up, don't get frustrated that you're not jiving with the churches around. Go to Jesus, go to the Lord for everything, and have him help you find this church. God will open up doors for you. He's the ultimate problem solver. So if you go to him, trust in him that you'll be able to find what it is you're looking for. Okay, so that's it for this video on churches. Okay? Yes, they have a function. No, their function is not and never was to be the gateway to God's kingdom. That's for Jesus, and that's for you to figure out with your relationship with Jesus. Okay? Churches can be great, but also churches can be horrible. So now we know, hopefully, avoid the Zionism and avoid the idol worship if that's what the church is pushing. All right, that's it. God bless you.